It's time now to look at the future. And the future, Revive, is a story of the network. It's a story of cooperation. It's a story of collaboration. It's a story, yes, of standing on the shoulders of giants with that mutual support to which we often pay tribute here at EuRA. So here on my immediate right, your left, is Steve Cryne, well known to many of you here, President and Chief Executive of CERC. Next to him, Lynn Shotwell, President and Chief Executive Worldwide ERC from the States, and our own dear Tad Zurlinden, Chief Executive of EuRA. A warm round of applause, please, for our panelists. Now, I've known Tad, since God was a boy, and I've known Steve since, when did you first appear on the EuRA scene? It's way back.
I think it was Stockholm, and that was 2012.
That's it. We're all growing old together, aren't we, Steve? And then I had the pleasure of meeting Lynn relatively recently when we put together a collegial conference called WECan. And I want to just recap for some of you who may not know the story of this collaboration, what happened. So how was it, if we can just go back into the history of things, how was it that these three sister organizations decided to get together? Who knew whom when, if we could figure out who knew whom when at what stage? First of all, it was you and you, wasn't it? Tad and Steve.
Yes.
And then Steve knew Lynn, and then Lynn and Steve knew one another, and then Tad met the two of you, and then we had WECan. So how was it? That was how it happened. But why was it that these three organizations decided to start working together?
Well, the pandemic really, it put a full stop on everything that we were doing, really, as associations, and it was like, heck, how do we manage this? How do we get through? How do we provide the ongoing support that our members need? How do we continue to do the research and the advocacy? And collectively, we came together and said, this is a huge problem. And we are not going to solve that problem as individual associations. We have to have more collaboration and partnerships between us. I think the chemistry was really important. Lynn and I had worked on North American immigration matters since 2010.
Something like that, yeah.
When Lynn was in her former position, and I had known Tad since he was a boy. And so it was a very natural discussion. We want to do this. We didn't have to sell it. It was just we're going to do this, and so that's how it
got together. But when we were talking the other day, you were talking about, we say collaborate, yes, and the power of the network, and we all recognize the power of the network. But you don't just create networks and collaborative organizations just for the sake of it, just for the joy of it, just so you can have a bigger gala dinner and have more fun. You do it because it's the only way to attack those big, hairy monster issues, which if you don't have that network, if you don't have that collaboration, you simply can't get to grips with. Sure. And you identified what some of these issues are.
Absolutely. So I had the pleasure of starting in this job in March 2020. And I really want to thank Steve and Tad for reaching out and, offering their support and help. And, my background before I was in this, I was a lobbyist for many years in Washington. And I see that the power of an association is that it brings competitors together to solve problems that we can't solve on our own. And so I think that's as true kind of for each of us individually, bringing our members together to work with governments, to work with civil society, to try to advance the interests of the global mobility industry. But beyond that, we all need to work together. And as Steve mentioned, we had worked together at the United Nations on a number of issues, prior to me joining Worldwide ERC, and that's the same spirit of collaboration that we're doing now with WECan.
And what do you think some of those problems are, though, the huge, hairy issues?
So the big ones, look, if you look across the whole issues, all of the ESG issues, immigration, none of us can solve those issues on our own. It really, if you think about what we're going through right now with the whole world, it's almost like 100 years ago. When you had the Industrial Revolution and they were figuring out the rules of that society, they'd had a war and a pandemic. And at the time, the International Labor Organization got together and said we should have a 40-hour work week. Well, now we're trying to say, what are the rules that govern, this new world of remote work? How are we going to establish the rules that govern our society today, whether it's about sustainability or migration? So we have to get together and have the voice and represent the global mobility industry and be working with governments, with other civil society organizations, with labor unions, and other business organizations, really to make sure that our voices are heard and we shape things in the way that we want, that is beneficial to us.
Yeah. And from a EuRA perspective, Tad, I mean, now you've met these two organizations and we're working in conjunction with them.
Yes.
What do you identify as some of the major issues? We all talk about migration, but you've often talked to me about, inclusivity and diversity,
Yes,
sustainability.
absolutely.
These are big hairy issues that we can't deal with on our own.
These are things that we have to do together because we can't do it alone. In terms of immigration, EuRA is obviously an international organisation. It's somewhat difficult for us to tackle that nut because we'd have to be lobbying in about 250 countries, which would be a little bit difficult for us. However, we can work with the other associations, the smaller associations in the different countries, to try and represent that represent those issues. But again, as you say, diversity is something extremely important. And the whole issue of sustainability, which, by the way, I came to the conclusion, sustainability is where conscious capitalism met green issues. So it's two things that have come together. And if you look at the various areas that the United Nations consider the 17 or whatever it is points, all of the things in there come from one of those two sides. And this is something that we, in conjunction, I think, with FIDI as well, are going to be looking at in the very, very near future to sort of come together with a sort of policy for all the associations.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is that an awful lot of work has been done already. I mean, Steve, after the weekend, and we perhaps, because not everybody was present at this virtual conference that was held, the WECan conference that we put together, and after that virtual conference that was held, when did we hold that? At the beginning of 2000?
April of
21.
Yeah.
2021.
And I don't know if it was under your aegis, Steve, or everybody's aegis, but a joint mission statement, a declaration was issued. If you'd like to speak through those three key points, Steve, the recovery, the recruitment, and the recognition that are the overarching themes underpinning what we're trying to do in this collaborative network.
Well, we came together for the event where we brought 3-4 different sessions together, but we felt we didn't want to just have an event. We wanted to really put a stake in the ground in terms of what we stood for, what we were trying to achieve through that collaboration, and obviously, recovery. Gosh, we thought we were getting back to normal, right? Until February 24th. And I must say that as I sit here, and 15 minutes ago I was sitting out there, I am honored and privileged to share the same stage as the 4 people that were here this morning, because this is what, and that's what our industry is about. It's rising to the challenge. It's rising. It's being flexible. It's being adaptable, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people, and that's the humanity that it kind of brings us together. And I think talking about the mission statement, which I'll speak to in a minute, and the one thing that I really, really want to share with people is the strength of our organizations is the community, it's the people, it's you, it's our members. We are here to serve you. And you make us stronger through your support and your participation in all the wonderful work that our 3 associations do. Because we can't do it without you, but we do it for you, because we believe that the work that we are doing will not only improve your businesses, but it will bring great value to the economies in which and where we are. So in terms of our mission statement, recovery, we're still going through that. We want to provide as much expertise, resources, education that will assist our industry on a global basis. Recruitment. We want to make sure that members, our member firms, have access to the international talent that they so badly need in order to support that recovery. Global trade only happened because people moved. It's goods and services move because people are in the right places. So the work that we do in supporting that is vitally important. Lynn just mentioned that we were at the United Nations actually just 2 weeks ago, providing business input to the UN body that is responsible for the Global Compact on migration, and we want to make sure that there's a business voice there. So we're advocating on your behalf. And then recognition of our industry. We don't get enough recognition. One of the speakers on the previous panel said, we don't have a voice. We don't have a voice. It's not, the people don't value, they don't see the great work that this industry does and the contribution that it makes to the economy. So, and, you know, the economic recovery that we're still going through.
Yeah. I mean, as I was saying probably a couple of days ago, what doesn't get monetized doesn't get recognized. If you were big pharma or you were, you know, the armaments industry, they're recognized, but the business that you generate in global mobility, and I have to tell you an anecdote. I was in Granada the other day with my daughter, and we were in a tour group of just 4 of us, 2 Californians, a surgeon and his wife, my daughter and myself. Guy said, "Why are you here?" I said, I'm here, I'm sort of hosting and moderating a global mobility conference. And he said it was like that. He thought it was for people in wheelchairs. Now, this sounds funny, but global mobility to people doesn't mean what, say, big pharma means, or the armaments industry means, or even the hospitality industry. I don't know how we even express what we do because it's so many things, but it's getting recognition at that level, because I think as soon as people start getting it, we're the people who match the talent with the task, and if you don't have the talent with the task, you're not going to get the job done properly. Once people start to understand that, they understand how you oil the wheels of the global economy, and that's probably the link in the narrative that's missing, that we're going to have to sort of focus our attention on at some stage. You've been doing a lot for recognition of the industry. I mean, you've now had a lobbyist back home in the UK.
In the
Try and get through to the clowns who are running our country.
Yes, well, this is very true. Yes, in terms of the ARP in the UK, we have been working with a lobbyist, and one of the first things he said was, "What effect does the relocation industry have on the UK economy?" And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I went away and I put out a couple of surveys, and I asked members to provide a few figures, and it's not perfect, but by the time I'd finished, I realized that if you take into consideration what the companies spend in terms of relo, that's nothing. But if you then look at what the people who are being moved spend, and what the companies that are moving them are spending, and blah, 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 and you work it all the way out, and then you factor in the removals and education and furniture rental, and you keep going and keep going and keep going, suddenly you come to a figure of 8 to 10 billion. And then if you take that figure and you multiply that over the world, which I think we've got to do, you're into trillions.
Yeah.
So make no bones about it. We may not be a particularly large in terms of numbers industry, but our effect is absolutely massive.
It's massive.
And in fact, we can probably chuck big pharma in and the armaments industry in and say that's all part and parcel of what relocation does for the world.
Of what we do. So recognition, and we will come back to this one, but very important, and I mean, this has been increasingly important even during the, 10, 15 years that I've been associated with you, the total importance of professional development within this organization, which has gone from strength to strength. And the education, and therefore the information that you come out with within your organization, objective, you know, unaffected by any issues whatsoever, objective information that you actually come out with, unbiased information. People may gainsay me on that, but my belief is everything that you do is done for all the right reasons, and therefore, you know, you have no axe to grind. So in terms of education, tell me what you're all doing, and then I want to come back to you at the end, Tad, because there's quite an important
Yes.
pronouncement that you want to.
There is one other slide which we slipped in.
Do you want to put it up? Oh, that?
Yes.
Well, just let's take a look at those stats.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk through that one, Steve?
No, I'm going to. Yeah.
Okay,
put
I
you on the
haven't
spot.
seen this in a year, but let me take a look. So look, I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, is that we need to do a much better job of telling our stories, of getting these statistics out to the public, out to business leaders, out to policymakers about the importance of mobility and really how that does keep the world moving. And the stories like the last panel we just had, I think it's so important to kind of tell those stories about the roles that we've had in, you know, helping employees leave countries in crisis, as well as supporting those who are left behind. And we have great stories to tell. We need to get them out there. But I think, you know, as we move into this new world of remote work, hybrid work, whatever we're calling it, I think for business leaders, what we have to start emphasizing are there will be compliance challenges that arise. And nobody is better positioned to understand these compliance challenges than global mobility professionals. You know, my friends from SHRM, where I used to work, are here. HR professionals, I think, had not dealt with so many of these issues. So all of the cross-border issues on, you know, migration and tax and employment law conflicts, all of these things that we've dealt with for so many years are now becoming, frankly, domestic issues in many places. And we are positioned to help with that, and we need to raise our voices.
You were wanting to talk about, I know you want to talk about the training that has been sort of gone from strength to strength, particularly over the pandemic, when, as I say, the important finally took over from the urgent in many of our lives, personally and professionally. I think you want to talk about something there, that an initiative that you have set up that was adverted to when you had your initial session, but I think you want to drill down on it now.
Yes. As a result of EuRA lost a... Oh dear. EuRA lost a very special person. Her name was Madalena McKiley, and we wanted to do something in her memory, and we were in a position where we had some money set aside that we could use, and so EuRA has set up the Madalena McKiley Scholarship Fund. The intention, of course, we want people to do training. The majority of our members are in places where they can afford to do the training. It's not expensive. But we believe that there are parts of the world which are going to develop, Africa, for example, where we may get more and more members who perhaps don't have as deep pockets. And the scholarship is intended to help people like that to educate themselves, to bring themselves up to the same level as everybody else throughout the world. And you know, this was like, this is the best thing we could do for this lady, because she believed in training. She put all her staff through training. She was passionate about relocation. She was even passionate about EuRA. She was fantastic, and she's somebody we always used to say, if the average member, the Madalena McKiley test, if it worked for her, it worked for all of you.
You know what? You all know Tad has a Swiss passport, but I think he's become terribly British because he has that failing, which is that we're always embarrassed to talk about money. And he's failed to do it again. He's a bit embarrassed at the moment because I think it has to be spelled out that training that has been given for free during the pandemic, you're now going to charge a very moderate sum, and that moderate sum is going to go into that fund.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think that has to be spelt out.
Yeah.
So I'm the nasty old wicked witch. It's giving you the good news. that honestly, the really moderate sums that will be asked of you are not going to, they're going into this fund, so that you mentioned it the other day, and it's a very important concept. Whenever we talk about diversity and inclusivity, we tend to think it's gender, it's culture, it's nationality. No, it's also financial inclusivity.
Yeah.
And if people can't afford things, we can talk till we're blue in the face about diversity and inclusivity. So it's an effort towards making sort of financial inclusivity a reality for those people who can't afford the kind of quality training that these organizations have been so spectacular in delivering. So I hope you're all in agreement with that. And it's really tough if you aren't, because that's what's going to happen.
And I have to give credit to the panel, the diversity panel here, and they did talk about financial inclusivity and the need for all of us to make sure that others can participate in our events. We heard you.
Yeah. Recognition. I mean, this is one of your issues, isn't it, Steve? The objective information and the research. I see the amount of research that you have done. I mean, jointly and severally and individually. It is quite extraordinary. And the beauty of this, I mean, we've been hearing horror stories from Russia about how people put out, you know, biased information, totally skewed information, basically information that isn't information at all, it's disinformation. And I want you to talk, Steve, about, I mean, the quality of the information and the quality of the research that we are doing.
Well, it's not just, it's across our organizations, and EuRA have collaborated. I was thinking about that this morning. EuRA collaborated with us on the global mobility survey that we did with Ipsos Public Research. And that was about, you know, the willingness of people to relocate for employment purposes. We did that twice. We did a study earlier this year with Lynn and the International Organization of Employers about immigration challenges around the world that businesses were experiencing. But so the research, vitally important, it feeds the work that we do as associations. Two things around that. It's, as you said, you used the word unfiltered. It is unfiltered. It's, you know, we're using that research in order to provide good quality information back and knowledge back to our respective members. In our case, within the Canadian content, we use the research also to drive our government advocacy work. And that's, I think, you know, that's the other thing that maybe we can chat a little bit about on some of the work that you've been doing, Lynn, and we, you know, collaboratively. But we have the ear of government when it comes to migration. And we need to make sure that we make that tent bigger from the business community. We really do. We've got to have a louder voice with governments around the world. And we can't do it on our own. We have to do it in partnership with other groups. And that's why I think the power of WECan, you know,
Yeah.
this is a good nucleus to build that out.
I want to leave 20, 15 minutes for questions, because I'm sure in the body of the Kirk there'll be lots of questions to you as the representatives of the three major organizations. But a couple of issues that came up in the WECan conference that really struck me deserve to be teased out a little bit further in this forum. The first one was, we used to have a slew of what we would call stellar cities, you know, the key cities, New York, Paris, you know, what else would you put on that map? London. These are the kind of cities that were the stellar cities for which sort of people used to go to. Now, because of the affordances of modern technology, you know, the move towards hybrid work, a lot more cities could be stellar cities. You can work in more places and still be doing top jobs. That's the first issue. Do you see a growth in business in these erstwhile non-stellar cities and now possibly stellar cities? That's one issue. And then there was a big issue that we talked about, because we found as the world came out of cotton wool, as it started to come out of its deep sleep, and then we were sent back into the deep sleep, and then we woke up again. And then we saw all these issues of supply chain management, and then all of a sudden it was onshoring versus offshoring, and then all of a sudden it was just in time rather than just in case, or just in case rather than just in time. Big issues. How do you see these playing out in the future? I mean, have you got any thoughts on that one, Lynn?
So I think we won't know how it's playing out for many years. It will continue to shift. I think what is so dramatic to me is how governments responded with the nomad visas, which this didn't happen by chance. I mean, for many years, we've been advocating with governments about you need to welcome talent. You need, demographic shifts. You have to welcome new talent, new energy into your countries. And many of them responded to that. So I think that's fantastic. I think the whole issue with, I think cities will come back. I think New York is not dead, London is not. But at the same time, they have to change. Only 8% of people, of office workers, are back in New York City full time. I don't think that's going to change. So what does that mean for our cities? I think they're going to have to reinvent themselves. And I think what's so interesting when you take all these issues is, how, as I mentioned, Steve and I have been going and talking about migration for many years. Well, now the mayor's conference is there as well. And there's a youth voice because everybody's recognizing that these are huge global issues that we have to solve. So I think there's a lot we can do. And, Steve mentioned the research he's doing. I think where we provide value is not-for-profit organizations, is we can provide kind of that unbiased information. We do our best to kind of get your voices out there. But at the end of the day, we need all of your voices. We need participants. We're often looking for people to go and speak with governments. And so it's so important to have not just, frankly, Americans and Canadians. We've been there. We're talking a lot. But we need everybody else's voices there as well.
Tad?
Yes, I absolutely agree. We need the smaller associations around Europe, like the ARP's doing, CERC in Switzerland, the SMPRM and Foreign MG in France, and ABRA, and all these associations. We need to get together so that we can sort of try and help each other to tackle some of these issues, and get, because whenever you say, anybody says the word immigrant, everybody assumes they're the sort of immigrants that governments are constantly being told that we don't want. No, we're looking at talent here, and it's very important that they can move from one place to another, and keep the world moving, as it were.
Yeah. We need flexible and predictable outcomes in migration policy at a global level, and that's one of the mandates that you saw in the declaration, and we're committed to that. And one of the things that we talked about that I want to touch on, and I'll put a challenge out to the community on this in a moment, but events over the last 2 years, as Lynn mentioned, we were quite optimistic that governments were going to embrace the idea about more open borders. Well, what we've seen in the last 2 years is actually governments have been tightening up their borders. And there is we heard it on the panel earlier, there is a creeping force around the world that is growing against immigration. There is an anti-immigration voice.
Anti-nationalism.
And we've been working collectively. Lynn and I participated in a project last year through the GFMD around a positive narrative around immigration. 40% of the Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants or sons of immigrants. For every 10 jobs that you will bring into the city of London that are high-skilled jobs, will create about 25 or 30. So our challenge is to have all of our members talking about the positive value and importance of migration in our respective countries.
I think the key is getting the stories out, and that will be our challenge. I'm going to make it my challenge as well to get those stories out. Now, we have 15 minutes for questions, and there must be an awful lot going on in your minds, and the opportunity to talk to the three of these people, sort of put any questions that you would want. So if there is nothing else you'd like to add to the discussion right now, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Are there any questions from the floor? If when you put a question, if you could put your hand up, we'll get a microphone to you. If you could give your name, rank, and serial number, and that would be helpful. Questions from the floor?
Oh dear.
They're all stirring from a fantastic. The diva has a question, Sabine. Is this because the diva does not drink alcohol? Because there's a definite stupor in this room. Sabine.
Hello. It's not a question, it's just an affirmation saying that as executive officer of SARA, I would be delighted to create something where all of the national association and the international association work together towards a better future. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sabine. Further questions from the floor? Well, I want you to get your membership money's worth, and you have every opportunity. Do we have another question here?
Hi, Audrey from Fragaman. Just a quick question. How do you see the future also of digitization and technology? Because now everything is about making everything more efficient, and I just wanted to hear your take on how is digitization going to impact our industry?
In terms of immigration?
In terms of immigration and mobility in general.
So, you know, I think I wrote the first comments to the U.S. Immigration Service about, taking records online in about 2002. And I think they now have, one form online? So I'm not holding out a lot of hope for that. But look, this is one of our key, Steve mentioned that one of our key points as we go and talk to governments is predictability, efficiency, transparency. And I have been encouraged that other governments have taken this up and are starting to do much more with digitization. And that's where we have to go. I think the challenge for all of us, and this was alluded to a little bit yesterday at the RMC panel, is we have our own challenges, right? So we did a survey recently of our members of corporate mobility professionals about technology. And unsurprisingly, the majority of them said, yes, we want to be able to get everything that's happening about the relocation across the entire supply chain in one place. Also, not surprisingly, perhaps, as they said, but we really don't have any money to pay for it either. And so I think we have our own challenges as a supply chain and as suppliers in figuring out how do we better share information. And if we can get our standards together and come up with something, then we can go to governments and say, this is what we've agreed to do. We don't need every government now coming up with completely different standards so that we have to adopt each of our systems. Because ultimately, I think ultimately what will happen is everything will flow digitally. It'll flow, from the company to all the suppliers and to the governments and back again. But that's going to take time, and it's going to take vision, and it's another one of those areas where we have to come together and agree on some common metrics and standards. Because if we're all going down the same different paths as companies, or frankly, if you're doing your standards and I'm doing mine, that's not helpful to anybody either.
Thank you for that question. Further questions from the
Can I ask a question of the audience? Would that be right?
Yeah.
I know during the pandemic, a lot of you were feeding back to us that actually immigration processes were going online in order to make things happen where you couldn't meet face to face. Where that happened, does anyone have experience of whether that stayed the case? Or did it get dropped once people could meet face to face again? Anyone have a comment on that?
Michelle Bramstoft, Copenhagen Relocations. The thing about Denmark is that they've been very advanced in digitalization. And one thing, and that started a while back, and it's just getting better because they're working on a new system that will, it's kind of Big Brother-ish, but it will combine all the tax office, the local registration, and then the first port of entry just to get your your work permit, work and residence permit. So I feel like they're ahead of the game. When this happens, you only have to upload your documents one time, and then we have for the rest, and that's good for GDPR and everything else. And yeah, but I'm nobody from France in immigration, because I'd like to know. I know that it did go digital. Is it going to stay that way?
Well, I think in response to the pandemic, you know, a lot of countries, and that's, you know, that's one of the things within the, we just put a paper forward to the UN Global Forum for Migration and Development on the Global Compact for Migration, and digitalization was a key part of that. Speaking from the Canadian experience, we've got 2.1 million immigration applications in the system. We're a country of about 37, 38 million. So we've got a backlog that is, they'll never get through it with the current system. So our government is committed, I think it's $650 million to upgrade our processing systems, but it has to take place. And I think we'll see it in our lifetime. I mean, Lynn, you said it was 2002, right? But I mean,
Maybe not in our careers, but in our lifetime.
But you know, that's the thing. I think one other thing I wanted to share with folks is that it wasn't until 1915 that you required a passport. You know, you could just pick up and go wherever you wished. So I don't see, you know, we're not returning to those days, but we definitely do need more open borders in order to move talent around. We're going to need them. You know, the immigration systems that are in place today were designed to keep people out.
Yes. Very true.
And we have to change that mentality.
I think where governments see a financial benefit to something,
Right.
they will do it quicker. I know this is a rather strange example, but in the UK there's a fantastic system. When somebody dies, you get a death certificate and you also get a password for a website. You go onto that website and you can literally, efficiently get rid of their passport, get rid of their state pension, so they're saving money, and you can literally shut them down immediately, anything to do with the government. And where they can see a saving, they're going to do it. That was obviously done with a view to not losing or having to chase people for money. Now, if they could see the same sort of thing in terms of immigration, which, you know, people pay huge sums of money for, they might actually pull their fingers out and actually do something.
Well, that's a brilliant example. You know, if they can shut you down that quickly, why can't they open you up that quickly?
Exactly.
It's just that really is a brilliant example of how things can be done when I mean, the thing, and this is in the literature. I mean, Steve and I in communication, we send one another bits of research and all the rest of it. We've got to change these social attitudes where people think, and there's an ugly nationalism that's prevalent in many of our countries, let's speak it out as it is, that's like immigrants are people we don't want, whereas in fact the narrative we have to try and convince people of is migration, these are the very people we want. They're the very people who are coming to do, you know, coming to do jobs and work.
Or TBB. Will you share the...
Sure.
Do you want to share a story on that?
So Steve just asked, so there's a group called Talent Beyond, is it Boundaries or Borders? Boundaries, yes. Anybody heard of TBB? So it's a fabulous nonprofit organization that was started maybe about 10 years ago. And what they do is they go into refugee camps and they identify the skills and document the skills that the refugees have. The challenge they have, and that they're making some progress is finding governments that will accept the refugees. So they have some pilot programs with Canada, Argentina, some other places to try to match the refugees with employers in those countries and provide the visas. We need so much more of this. And you know, they've been working primarily in Jordan, but I believe they're now looking at working with the Ukrainians. I think, you know, the current refugee crisis, I hope is helping shift the narrative a little bit, because, countries have said that they're being welcoming. Whether they're actually implementing that as quickly, I know, in the UK and the US, they're not welcoming people as quickly as we would like. But I hope that that maybe opens the door and helps everyone understand kind of the compassion that we need to show anyone from anywhere around the world who's in crisis. Unfortunately, I think that the political narrative is not moving in that direction. And, and you mentioned is kind of like our supply chain shifting. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch as well as companies shift where they're doing business, and that's going to change your traditional corridors of migration and employees. We're going to have to take some different attitudes towards migration than we have in the past. And the countries that do will be the ones that thrive.
That's right.
Well, I think it was you who sent me that McKinsey research. It's those companies who swiftly manage to match top talent with high-value tasks who will have the competitive advantage in the future. So, and it's not only top talent, it's talent to do any job. I was listening to Radio 4 this morning, the good old BBC, despite everything, it is a fairly unbiased source of information. We have no truck drivers in the UK now. Oh, and they'll give people a visa for that job, with that employer. This isn't good enough. We really have to be a little bit more open in our attitudes.
It's
Steve, it's the anger crackling. It's the
Sorry.
We're probably sitting on a wire. Don't worry.
Sorry, Minnie. It's the same. It's the same the world over, and I just want to tie the idea back about TBB and social responsibility and associations and the roles that we play as associations in our regions, and supporting organizations like TBB, working, we advocated for that group with our government in Canada, saying that they needed to work with them and find more open spots. I think they've now made it was a pilot program, now it's a permanent program. Business has got behind it in a big way, big way in Canada. I'm overwhelmed with the speed that has gone, from a tiny acorn that they had. So I just tie it back to the value of associations. We can have meetings, we can do these, we can have our conferences and talk about really important things and then take those things back. I've learned so much being here in the last 2 days. The sessions that we've had on diversity and social responsibility and sustainability. I mean, those are things that we can get behind as association heads and leaders.
Yes. We have a couple of minutes left. One more question. A question over here. Then to wind up, I'm going to ask.
Hi, Susan Ginsburg, SRG Advisory. Amongst us, you have a plethora of brilliant career coaches, resume writers, business consultants. I'm wondering, on behalf of your 3 associations, perhaps you can start an initiative gathering a group of people to help TBB and other organizations to act as a conduit, not only with the legislation, which I recognize you're already doing, but to leverage the talent amongst us worldwide to help provide the support to refugees who are looking for that little bit of warmth, or more tangibly, resume assistance, career coaching, business assistance to help them find work. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree.
I think that's great, and we could talk up. There are other organizations as well that try. It's not just the refugees, but it's other migrants who come to the country, through family routes or others who are then underemployed, and so there are other organizations working at that. I think there's so much that we could be doing, and also to play off of that, I think one of the challenges that we see within our organization right now is that all of you are having a hard time finding employees right now, right? Yeah. And so, we have a career bank. I think all of us have career banks, but can we leverage that to help one of the things our young professionals did recently is a video talking about why they like working in mobility. And so we posted that out, and we have an initiative, Bob Rosing helped spearhead this, where we're trying to raise internships for students of color across the mobility industry. The goal was 25 this year, it's 100 next year. But part of that is telling these students, like, why do you want to work in mobility? What a great career opportunity it is. So we need to do a better job of that as well.
Tad, to wind up.
Well, honestly, that's a very, very sensible suggestion, and it's something that we should talk about. To wind up altogether.
Well, we're running out of time.
Oh, well, I'm going to wind up altogether by saying we were talking about supporting charities, supporting this, that, and the other. You can all support charities in this room on this day. We have a silent auction. It's still far too low, or the combined bids are far too low, and we are dividing what we raise together, together with what EuRA has already set aside, and also the money raised on the Just Giving page. This money is going to go and help. Part of it is going to go and help our friends in the Ukraine by supporting 2 charities, and another part is going to a local charity to support children. So please, please, please act in a sustainable fashion and go and bid on things, and also go and fill in your Where Next card or buy a T-shirt. Please do this, and that's all I'm going to say now.
There you go, and what a fabulous note to end on. So thank you so much, Steve and Lynn and Tad, and thank you for your participation in this.